Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer, where today we're going to unpack one of the most fascinating, mind-bending illusions in the entire natural world, the concept of the food chain. We all grow up learning that nature is divided up into these neat little boxes, right? You've got the hunters and you've got the hunted. But what actually happens when those lines blur? What happens when the hunted literally becomes the hunter?
To see what I mean, picture this. It's 1969, we're on Isla Española in Ecuador, and a wildlife photographer captures something that completely shatters our grade school understanding of how nature is supposed to work. They watched a marine iguana just scrambling across this black volcanic rock, carrying a crab in its mouth. Now hold on, because marine iguanas are supposed to be strict herbivores. They spend their whole lives underwater just grazing on algae. So seeing one deliberately hunt down and eat another animal, it creates this massive sense of cognitive dissonance. It just feels wrong.
And that brings us directly to the core mystery we are solving today. Can prey actually evolve into predators? Now, at first glance, the answer feels like a hard no. Predators eat prey, and prey spend their entire lives just trying to avoid predators. The rabbit doesn't suddenly wake up and become the fox. The deer doesn't turn into the wolf. It seems like a total biological contradiction, right?
And this brilliantly illustrates the massive gap between how we view the world and how nature actually operates. We absolutely love our neat, fixed human labels. A fox is always a predator. A rabbit is always prey. But here's the thing. Evolution's reality completely ignores those little boxes. It doesn't care about our labels at all. It only cares about fluid roles based entirely on survival and reproduction. Literally, if a trait helps an organism survive, evolution rewards it, period.
In fact, very few animals actually sit permanently at the very top of the food chain. Most occupy a bunch of different positions in the food web all at once. Lions, as fearsome as they are, can absolutely be killed by crocodiles. Sharks get eaten by larger sharks. Young wolves are highly vulnerable to bears. Even a small fish that hunts insects is constantly looking over its shoulder for larger fish. So it turns out, a lot of species out there are both predator and prey simultaneously.
But before we can truly understand exactly how animals switch from being prey to becoming predators, we have to talk about the mechanics of the food web. Specifically, we need to talk about energy. Because transitioning to a hunting lifestyle, it isn't just some simple behavior change. It comes with a steep biological cost.
It really all comes down to the energy pyramid. Sunlight continuously feeds the base, the plants, and herbivores efficiently capitalize on this. Grass doesn't run away, leaves don't fight back, making a plant-based diet incredibly cheap and energetically efficient. But the moment you transition to being a carnivore, you only receive a tiny fraction of that original energy. A huge amount of energy is just lost at each step moving upward. And this massive bottleneck is exactly why you see millions of deer in the wild, but far fewer wolves.
Moving up that food chain is just incredibly demanding. Predators are paying a massive biological tax. Think about it. They need sharper senses just to track their targets, larger brains to outsmart them, stronger muscles to actually catch them, and massive energy reserves just to fuel the hunt itself. The overhead costs of being a carnivore are quite frankly astronomical.
So, looking at that unbelievable biological price tag, we really have to ask, why would a prey animal ever take on that enormous cost to become a predator? If eating leaves is so safe and energetically cheap, why bother hunting? Well, the answer pivots away from the sheer cost of hunting and points directly to the incredible power of biological opportunity.
Now, what's really interesting here is that we can actually see this biological opportunity playing out in real time right now through some seriously bizarre opportunistic diets. Get this, modern Scottish red deer have actually been observed deliberately eating seabirds. White-tailed deer are occasionally documented consuming small animals, bird eggs, and even fish. These are what you might call gateway carnivores. They're mostly herbivores, sure, but they supplement their diet when an opportunity pops up because meat offers incredibly valuable protein and calcium. And if natural selection rewards those behaviors, they can gradually become more and more common.
And if you let that opportunism run wild over evolutionary time, you get something like the terrifying grasshopper mouse. This is a brilliant example of a small prey animal evolving into a highly active, totally specialized predator. Its ancestors were just ordinary seed-eating rodents. But today, the modern grasshopper mouse actively stalks its prey, uses ambush tactics, possesses a natural resistance to scorpion venom, and literally hunts down scorpions, lizards, and even other mice. It completely rewrote its own biological job description.
Now that mouse is a fantastic modern example, but the deeper we look into the past, the more dramatic these transformations actually become. So we're going to shift our focus now to the climax of this explainer and look back millions of years at the ancestors of today's most feared hunters. Because believe it or not, almost every predator alive today descends from something that was once prey to something else.
Trace the history of modern birds, for example, and you'll find that millions of years ago, their ancestors were actually small, vulnerable feathered dinosaurs occupying the lower levels of the food chain, just trying to survive alongside much larger, scarier predators. But over immense periods of time, some lineages began to evolve powerful beaks, razor-sharp talons, and exceptional eyesight. Eventually, they transformed into the eagles, hawks, and owls of today. An animal lineage that was once highly vulnerable evolved to completely conquer the skies. Let's move on and see how this builds, because this same phenomenon plays out in the ocean with the mind-blowing evolutionary journey of the killer whale. Their ancestors were actually land mammals roughly the size of dogs. They started out as scavengers and small-game hunters along ancient shorelines. But over millions of years, they entered the oceans, diversified, and transformed into modern orcas, apex predators, capable of hunting seals, other whales, and even great white sharks. A lineage that lived among predators on land eventually became the absolute ruler of the seas.
And hey, this phenomenon isn't just limited to vertebrates either. In the insect world, the distant ancestors of the praying mantises likely fed on plant material or decaying matter, but over time, they evolved these highly specialized forelegs for grabbing, and they developed binocular vision. Step by step, small advantages simply accumulated generation after generation until they emerged as the vicious, ambush-hunting praying mantises we recognize today. Evolution didn't pre-plan this, it just rewarded what worked.
All of this leads us to a profoundly humbling realization about apex predators. These categories are always temporary. The food chain can, and absolutely does, move in reverse. Evolution has no preferred direction at all. It doesn't view predator as some sort of ultimate biological achievement. Sometimes, as environments change, the terrifying hunters actually become the victims.
Consider this ultimate irony. Some of the fiercest hunters to ever exist, like the giant terror birds of South America or the mighty saber-toothed cats that vanished roughly 10,000 years ago, they went completely extinct. Why? Because being an apex predator doesn't shield you from threats like disease, relentless parasites, starvation, or a change in climate. Being a predator guarantees you absolutely zero success. In fact, many of those fierce Ice Age hunters died out completely, while their small, vulnerable, plant-eating prey survived and adapted perfectly fine. So the crucial point is this. Evolution doesn't see prey and predator as separate identities. It sees opportunities. Every rabbit alive today comes from countless ancestors that survived millions of years of being hunted. And every wolf descends from animals that were once hunted themselves. The natural world isn't some fixed ladder. It's a messy, ever-changing web. Which leaves us with one final thought to ponder. As our global environment rapidly changes today and brand new opportunities arise, what seemingly harmless prey animal sitting in your backyard right now might be taking its very first evolutionary steps toward becoming tomorrow's apex predator. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.